Welcome back everyone for the most piercing return, Cobra Kai Season 6 Watch Party! Season 6 is gonna be huge. They freaking told us so. And in that hugeness, there's gotta be a lot of returns. I've covered many of them for a while now, and I wanted to combine all the Julie Pierce information and theories into one super video. Use the chapters on the timeline to navigate each part. Now, Cobra Kai has already had so many great returns. But for now, let's focus on the one main character who hasn't come up yet, Julie Pierce. Where has she been? In Boston, I suppose. Clearly, she's been waiting in the wings. And it's not exactly rocket science, but you notice that the show has more or less followed the order of the movies in reintroducing characters. Start with Season 1, where we had characters from The Karate Kid. Then Season 2 was the Season of Kreese. Season 3 finished the first movie with Ali, and also moved on to Karate Kid 2 with Kumiko and Chozen, and even a cameo from the Bell Tower Girl. Then Season 4 moved on to Karate Kid 3 with Terry Silver. What a moment. Season 5 stayed with Karate Kid 3 and reintroduced Jessica Andrews as Amanda's cousin. But she wasn't all. It also brought back
Mike fucking Barnes.
So if you look at the totality, this show has really been going in order. By the way, this was also pretty clear as of Season 2, which is why I always rolled my eyes when people said, Julie Pierce has to come back next season. It's like there's a pattern here, people. So anyway, if we follow the pattern, what comes next is gonna be the next Karate Kid. Ah yes, the poor attempt to restart the franchise with a gender-swapped Daniel LaRusso. Okay, obviously Julie Pierce is not a gender-swapped Daniel. She's an entirely original character, which is actually something they did back then. Also, no one cared that they were making the main character a girl this time, but mostly that's probably because no one really cared at all. The movie did not do well. Well deserved too, it kinda sucks. But for our purposes, it does give us Julie Pierce. She's the only other student of Mr. Miyagi. But now the reasonable question will come up. If Julie Pierce is coming back in Season 6, then how? Like, she lives far away and is outside of the story. She knew Miyagi, yeah, and there is evidence she at least visited LA and trained with Daniel at the Miyagi-Do Dojo. But how does she get involved? Sit back and grab some popcorn, dear friend. This is why we have a watch party. So as you know, Season 6 will have the Sekai Takai, the World Tournament. It's gonna be big and it's gonna be brutal. That is our first key. The tournament is where it's at. Now, if you look around the fandom, you'll see a lot of discussion about what'll happen at this tournament. You'll notice almost all of it revolves around who'll win the thing. Miguel, Robbie, Sam, or maybe Miguel wins the boys division and Sam wins for the girls. The problem is they are imagining the Sekai Takai as just another All-Valley tournament, but in a different setting. This is not just another All-Valley tournament. It will be bigger and more intense. The structure will likely be very different. That is the key. As part of that different structure, there is a very good chance the tournament will include a sensei bracket. It sort of makes sense, right? Like the whole dojo is competing, not just individual students. So we've had a boys bracket and a girls bracket. Couldn't there be a sensei bracket? It is something we haven't seen before, and it would be huge in the show. Keep in mind, when the committee was evaluating the dojos, they also took a look at the senseis. Terry Silver pointed out Cobra Kai's.
And our senseis are second to none.
Look at that. This all strongly implies they are part of the competition somehow. So maybe there's a boys bracket, a girls bracket, and a sensei bracket. But wait, let's go on. There's more. What if the sensei bracket has two divisions itself? A men's bracket and a women's bracket. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have men and women fighting each other just because they're the senseis. No problem for Sensei Kim and her Cobra Kai. She has her senseis from The Fist, and she herself can fight in the women's bracket. But what about Miyagi Fang? They have plenty of men to choose from. Daniel, Johnny, Chosen, even Mike Barnes. But they need a woman to compete in the women's bracket. Amanda is only karate adjacent. What are they gonna do? Forfeit? Lose? No, only a pussy forfeits. They have to find a woman sensei, someone with strong training who can hold her own in a fight, preferably someone who is already from the Miyagi-verse. Enter Julie Pierce. Julie is the answer to their problem. She's what they're looking for. You can imagine it is solved as a cross between how Johnny went looking for a female fighter Da-Eun and how Daniel remembered
Mike fucking Barnes.
So maybe a phone call does the trick and Julie Pierce comes strutting in. How about a similar scene at the airport where Kim Da-Eun came in? Except this time it's Julie. I mean, it probably won't be that, but it's fun to contrast the image. This will probably be early in the season. It could be as early as episode 1, but maybe around episode 3, which is the same episode Barnes appeared in. This gives plenty of time for some training and story to happen. Several episodes of build-up for the major tournament. Now obviously, if the Sekai Tekai has a women's bracket for the senseis, then you just know it'll come down to Julie against Sensei Kim. This is actually a little fitting for Julie's story. As you remember from her movie, well, maybe you don't remember because you never saw it, which is understandable. But if you saw it, you would remember that Julie never got a fight in a tournament. It was a straight up street fight against the Alpha Elite. So Julie deserves a chance at a tournament win, and this is it. It's fair to wonder if she's kept up with her karate, and I think the answer is yes. As I said, season 2 slightly implied she at least came to LA and trained with Mr. Miyagi and Daniel. That's not much, but I think we can assume she kept up with her karate. Plus, a little extra training before the tournament and she'll be ready. Can you imagine her doing a kata with Daniel? How would you like to see this shot recreated, except instead of Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, it's Daniel and Julie? I kind of think it would be appropriate. It's a homage and send-off to the classic Miyagi-Do training session. Now is that it for Julie Pierce? She comes back to train for a few episodes and help win the Sekai Tekai? If she's only in it for a couple episodes, it would be. However, it would be cool if she was involved in some sort of street brawl outside of the tournament. I think this could be the case. Not necessarily with Kim Da-Eun, but maybe some other tough fighters who want to rough her up before the event starts. I guess I want to see Julie in multiple fights. The one other character connection that could be significant for Julie, other than Daniel, is another girl who needs some guidance and direction. Someone whose karate could help provide that in life. Obviously, I'm talking about Tori. Seriously, since season 2, I've always felt like there were some significant parallels between Tori and Julie. Maybe Julie could help Tori out a little, especially if her mother dies. Now granted, this may have made more sense a few seasons ago, when Tori was still bursting with rage and anger. She had some moments with Amanda and has been able to get a level head since. But it doesn't fully diminish the potential. Actually, maybe instead of just helping Tori, which Amanda already did, Julie can serve as a bridge between Tori and Sam. She has sort of lived both sides and can maybe bring them together. There's also the possibility that Julie could introduce Miyagi-Do to Tori. It's understandable if Tori doesn't feel comfortable going there to train with Sam and Daniel, but maybe she would be willing to train with Julie. You can imagine Julie sharing a story about Mr. Miyagi to her. I can't really say the details, you never can. And there's also Da-Eun, so it's not going to be the biggest part of her arc. But there is still a lot of potential for Julie here. But it all hinges on her return, which has been the biggest unanswered question. But now, with the help of a little logic, we may have confirmation she will be back, and in episode 1 no less. Let's pierce or piece something together. It starts with this from John Hurwitz's Q&A. He was asked about a character returning, and he did confirm there would be a character from the movies who had not yet appeared in the show. Now initially I thought this could be Freddy Fernandez. He hasn't shown up. There's also the possibility of Snake or Dennis, especially since Terry Silver has been taken off the board. However, I now believe there's a good chance that this character could straight up be Julie Pierce. To understand why, we have to take everything that has happened in full context. You remember that last May, Season 6 went into production as scheduled. I broke the news and there was much rejoicing in the fandom. Just prior to this, the cast got together for a read-through of the script that Netflix shared glimpses of. They filmed one episode and then the decision was made to shut down. The writers were on strike and they thought it was in the best interest of the show to stop work and wait for everything to end. Thus began the 7-month delay in production. It sucked. There wasn't much to go on. Eventually the writer's strike ended and the writers resumed. Well, that was good news. It looked like they now had plenty of time to flesh out the season rather than bulldozing into it head first. That extra time would help make the season just perfect. The actors' strike then ended, and they went back into production early in January 2024. Season 6 was back on. Shortly after they resumed production, Hurwitz had that mentioned Q&A. He also said,
"On our first day of shooting, 2 characters I love, who have never shared screen time, had a really fun moment together. Looking forward to more of that happening."
Obviously, that brought a lot of speculation as to who he was referring to. It's not easy as he does love all the characters. However, he has specifically talked about loving Julie Pierce, even if she's not the only one. So that doesn't prove anything, except we have this very revealing piece of info, courtesy of Sholo and Jacob.
They rewrote the first one, I heard, though.
They rewrote the first one. Yeah, we had already filmed the first one. We're going to redo it. We got some new sauce for you guys, but
That is a very big piece of news. They rewrote the whole first episode to the point where they're just starting over. That's a little strange. While it's common that they may rewrite a scene here or there or add something for a pickup, it's very unusual to rewrite an entire episode that has already been shot. So when they resumed production, they were actually shooting episode 1 all over again. So wait a second, let's go back to what John said. He talked about the first day of shooting, which would have been episode 1 all over again. And there are 2 characters he loves having a moment together. His message really implies these characters were not previously together when they shot episode 1 back in May. So this is something completely new, and we are still wondering, why exactly would they rewrite an entire episode they already shot? Film production is expensive, and you just don't throw away 2 weeks spent towards an episode without a very good reason. There's only one logical reason I can come up with. That is, there was an actor they wanted who was unavailable back in May, but who is now available in January. And if you look at the roster of who would have likely been unavailable back in May, but is free to shoot now, the most obvious answer is Hillary Swank. You remember Hillary gave birth to twins last April. It was happy news, but then production started on season 6 right at the beginning of May, less than 1 month after the babies were born. It's not at all surprising to consider that even if Hillary Swank wanted to come back for season 6, she was in no condition at that time. She had just given birth to twins and had to obviously recover, as well as get into routine with the babies. So it's no surprise that they wrote season 6 with the idea that maybe she would be available towards the end of the production shoot, and maybe just for a short time. However, things change. The strike happened. Production shut down. It stayed shut down for months and months. While the writers and then actors fought for a good deal, Hillary obviously was able to recover. She was able to adapt to her new life as a mom. Now, 7 months later, it's a different story. She recovered from her pregnancy and birth, and maybe she's free to hop into the show. Except to include her now would require a rewrite, as in the original draft, she only had a small role towards the end of the season. If they want to include her up front in episode 1, it would require a massive rewrite of the whole season. So they had to sit down and replot and rewrite the whole season, starting with episode 1. Hence,
they rewrote the first one. Yeah, we had already filmed the first one. We're going to redo it.
It's also worth pointing out, the only time they completely rewrote episodes like this was to expand the part of for a legacy character. Originally, it was Allie. Michael Jonathan Smith explained how her appearance in season 3 was expanded.
Originally, Allie was gonna only be in one episode, Well, when we first broke the season, we were like, okay, we're going to first see her face at the end of 5, and then we'll scatter her throughout, and you probably won't see her until the end of 9, beginning of 10. And then we realized, like, no, it's Allie, it's Elizabeth Shue, we have her, we should give her as much as possible and stretch out everything. So we actually did a big reorder at the end of the season where we turned episode 10 into 2 episodes, and they were still really long. It's Allie, it's Elizabeth Shue, we have her, we should give her as much as possible and stretch out everything. So we actually did a big reorder at the end of the season.
So you see, the last 3 episodes of season 3 were completely reworked and rewritten to put Allie in 2 episodes instead of 1. So if there were ever a reason to literally rewrite and reshoot the first episode, as well as everything coming after it, that is the one. So I think John was talking about Julie Pierce when he said this. There's one other piece of news that recently came out. A local media outlet reported that they were shooting in Cave Spring, Georgia, which is a small town, I guess, a ways outside of Atlanta. Now, the area actually does have a cave, and most people are focused on that. Obviously, a cave is kind of cool and a big deal, but there's something else I want to point out. You see, Cave Spring is an older community with a lot of historic homes. It's not new or hip. So if you browse through the homes in the area, you can actually see this one, a real home in that community. While it's obviously a different house, doesn't it look strikingly similar to this house? You remember, this is the house Julie Pierce grew up in. It's the house from the movie. Like, do you think they could take this house, change the exterior up a little bit to make it look like this house? You remember how they remade the original Cobra Kai Dojo back in season 1. It was different from the movie, but still close enough that it worked. So maybe the cave itself isn't the biggest thing about their shooting in Cave Spring. Maybe they were filming some local shots of Julie Pierce at her home. Maybe Daniel paid her a visit. He needs all the help he can get, and there's only one other person in the world who was personally trained by Mr. Miyagi. You need to prepare for a full season of Julie Pierce, because season 6 is gonna get wild. But the biggest question that remains, is this true? What does Hillary Swank herself have to say about any of this? Well, recently something else has come up. Hillary Swank has been promoting her new movie, Ordinary Angels, and gave an interview with Collider. First off, he asked her about the new movie that's hijacking the Karate Kid brand to make money. She didn't even know it existed. But more importantly, she was asked if she will return in Cobra Kai. Well, here's how she answered.
I don't think I am.
Well, I guess that seals it. I don't think I am. That's what she said. Obviously, anyone who thinks that is proof she's not coming back shouldn't be taken seriously in life. It's as misguided as the people who believe Hayden when he said there were only 10 episodes in the season. Goodness gracious. While there's nothing certain, the characteristics of lying aren't that complicated. Cobra Kai Wisdom mentioned how she looks away, which is part of it but not everything. That's about how people don't want to make direct eye contact while lying. She actually looks back at the end, which is direct eye contact, but then she's talking to a camera and not a person anyway. It really works like this. Telling the truth is easy. You just say what it is. If you lie, you have to think about what your lie is going to be. Well, look at her.
I don't think I am.
She had to think about it. Keep in mind, season 6 is in production right now. If she were coming back, she would have been contacted in some way. If she weren't contacted, she could have easily said, "They never even asked me, so I'm shooting another movie instead." But of course, she didn't say that. The concept of a person having to think about what to say can get overcomplicated, but it doesn't have to be. You can usually tell the difference between some random detail a person may have to think about or remember versus someone trying to think of a lie. Now rewatch Hillary Swank answer a very simple question.
But I think more people are interested in seeing you in Cobra Kai.
Okay, so we'll move off of my being in the movie. I don't think I am.
While she didn't pause like that other guy, you understand that if she had to think about what she was going to say, like that, she's hiding something. The only thing to hide is her return to Cobra Kai. It's worth noting that when Thomas Ian Griffith came back in season 4, they called him at least a month before shooting and said, "You're coming to Atlanta." Obviously, there had been discussions with him before that too. In a similar situation, that would have been back in December, not to mention when they originally started last May. This is a very long way to say there's nothing to think about. She already knows if the answer is yes or no. If it were no, she could say so, easily. If she has to think about what to say, well, she has to think about it. Here we are again, something to hide. But if Julie Pierce does return, is she in fighting shape? Well, John Hurwitz offered this update about the editing. He said the episodes have been coming in, and he noted one particular fight they watched for the first time. He called it one of the most crowd-pleasing fights of the series. That means you're gonna love it. But more importantly, it is a fresh new team-up. So then, who is it? Who's joining forces to kick ass? I seriously believe this fight is specifically referring to a team-up of Julie Pierce and Daniel LaRusso. Julie Pierce is definitely the all roads lead to Rome character of season 6. That is to say, everything's coming up Julie Pierce. Insert her into the story and everything makes sense. Basically, Julie is back in episode 1, and you know stuff is going to get hectic fast. Sensei Kim will rebuild the dojo with her students from South Korea. Also, if he learns Kreese is still alive and had escaped, Daniel may want to track him down. It's personal for him. Now, having called in the help of Julie Pierce, Daniel would set out with her. Somewhere along the way, they encounter some thugs looking to make trouble. That's when the fighting begins. If you think about it in terms of story, it really adds up. Julie Pierce enters the story in episode 1. Daniel called her in because he needs a woman sensei. Now that she's in the game and established at the dojo, it's time for a fight. Consider the model of previous seasons. In season 3, episode 1 ended with the first of Daniel and Johnny deciding to work together. Then in episode 2, they had their adventure together that culminated in that great fight at the illegal auto repair shop. They were fighting, you guessed it, a bunch of criminal thugs. It was a great team up. It was a great fight, and most importantly, it happened in episode 2. What about season 4? Well, once again, Daniel and Johnny were training each other. Johnny was doing his part by putting Daniel to the test. The real test, though, was for Daniel to fight a hockey team Johnny provoked. Johnny was
"No be there."
The point is, this was a great fight that was the climax of an early season storyline. The fight wasn't the biggest, it was against a bunch of douchebag hockey players. They're sort of the throwaway villains we get in these episode 2 fights. Now consider season 5. Daniel recruited Chosen at the end of season 4. In episode 1, they started their mission by staking out Cobra Kai and spying on Silver. When episode 2 came along, you guessed it, Chosen went on his mission to infiltrate Silver. That mission culminated in a huge fight with Chosen against several senseis. Have you seen the pattern? You notice how the senseis and the hockey players and the thugs in the illegal auto repair shop are all essentially the same? Each one of these fights caps an early season storyline. Each one is against a group of thugs or douchebags or what have you. In a way, they're interchangeable. Each fight featured something we hadn't seen before. Daniel and Johnny fighting together. Daniel striking first against the douchebags. And finally, Chosen taking on these senseis. Now take the pattern and carry it into season 6. You already know Julie is coming back in episode 1. That is going to be a major early season storyline in itself. It is the exact sort of early season storyline that should have a mini climax at the end of episode 2. And since Daniel is the one bringing Julie in, who else is she going to have that epic fight with? Now obviously we don't know any of the other details. We don't know what they're doing or who the douchebag villains are this time around, but we can expect a cool fight like this. Keep in mind, what it accomplishes is that Julie is still top game and is ready to be in the show as a sensei. And it's worth noting, I consider all these episode 2 fights to be very underrated. They're a lot of fun and exciting, and judging from John's tweet, this one may be as well. I do think the biggest likelihood involves Daniel looking for Kreese, but falls into the underbelly of the valley. Perhaps Kreese realizes he's being tracked and convinces some thugs to go after Daniel and Julie. Or Sensei Kim is looking for payback. She has access to some local Cobra Kai loyalists who will attack in some way. It could even be the remnants of the Fist, but I'm not sure they'll be back. Plus, as they got trashed a few episodes ago, the vibe would be wrong to see them lose again. John Hurwitz has said he adores Julie Pierce, so when he talks about a new fan favorite fight that puts together fighters for the first time, she and Daniel make the most sense. He's long since wanted an opportunity to make Julie shine in a way she never did in her original movie. It's similar to what they did with Terry Silver in seasons 4 and 5. John is loving this and we're in for a treat. And when Julie does come back, will she then be helping make decisions for the dojo? Like, what about the dojo name? This has been teased for a while. Last summer during the writer's strike, Netflix released behind-the-scenes glimpses that featured this dialogue.
Victorious dojos are immortalized, and for individual competitors, the sky's the limit.
But before we throw our hats into the mat,
there's one thing we need to do. Decide our dojo name.
So we knew it was going to be a big issue, but the speculation only accelerated when Hayden Schlossberg confirmed the new dojo name would be revealed or decided upon in episode 1. So the answer will come very early, essentially before anything else in the season gets going. What will it be? If Daniel brings in Julie Pierce for help, she could be the third source for karate knowledge, and ultimately the tiebreaker in the dojo name. While she was obviously trained by Mr. Miyagi, maybe she has her own dojo back home. Would they actually go with something like Pierce Karate? If Johnny comes to like Julie, he may be willing to go along with that. There are other possibilities, like Julie could use a name from the monastery where she first trained with Mr. Miyagi. Now that name was never mentioned in the movie, so they would be free to make up something completely new. It could also be inspired from the Japanese rock garden, where she learned to believe in herself. There are other possibilities that connect back with Julie, something to do with Boston, Tea Party Karate? That sounds odd. Something with her school or Eric, or this old yard where they hung out? What do you think? It could also be something with all of them, 3 senseis, East meets West Karate. I think someone had that idea once. I don't think the Ultimate Dojo name will be something random the way Eagle Fang was. It will involve either Julie or all 3 of them coming together in some fashion. On that note, what if they called the new dojo the Karate Kids? It kinda works, it makes sense, it's got kick. I'd buy it. So you can bank that Julie Pierce is coming back. The Miyagi-verse just wouldn't be complete without her. But now that we've covered Julie, what about Mike